I'm Sienna Walsh, 29 years old, a licensed physical therapist at a sports medicine clinic in Denver, Colorado. For 4 years, I sent my parents $1,500 every single month. First of the month, every month, never missed one. That's $18,000 a year. $72,000 total, wired straight from my account to theirs like clockwork. I covered their rent. $800 a month for their apartment in Lakewood, just 20 minutes from me. I paid their car insurance because my dad said he'd let it lapse just until things stabilized. I covered my mom's prescriptions, her specialist copays, my dad's chiropractor visits for the back injury he said had kept him from working since he was 53. Their gas and electric accounts were literally in my name, because it was cheaper that way. Or so I told myself at the time. I told myself a lot of things back then. But on the day I closed on my first home, the day I'd been quietly saving toward for 6 years while doing all of this, my parents didn't show up. They didn't call to say they were running late. They didn't send a text. When I finally got my mom on the phone, she told me, and I'm quoting her exactly here, to stop making everything about yourself, Sienna. I hung up, and within the hour, I canceled every automatic payment I had ever set up in their names. 30 minutes after that, my dad's number started lighting up my phone, over and over. I watched it ring and set it face down on my brand new kitchen counter. I didn't answer, not once. Here's what 4 years of giving looks like up close, because I think people hear a number like $72,000 and imagine someone wealthy, someone for whom that kind of money barely registers. I'm not that person. I was a 25-year-old new grad making decent money for my age, not extravagant money. I drove a 2014 Honda Civic with a cracked dashboard. I bought my groceries at Aldi. I didn't take vacations. I didn't own a couch that cost more than $200 until I was 28. Every month I sat down at my laptop, looked at my bank balance, transferred the money, and felt the pinch immediately. Some months it meant skipping the dentist. Some months it meant I ate rice and rotisserie chicken for 2 weeks straight because I'd miscalculated what I had left. My dad's back injury was real. I want to be fair about that. He'd hurt it at a warehouse job when I was in high school, and it genuinely did limit him. My mom had her own health stuff, chronic migraines that were debilitating on bad days. I understood why they struggled. I did. That's the thing about being the responsible kid. You understand things. You factor in context and give people the benefit of the doubt, and you just keep showing up, month after month, because you were raised to believe that family takes care of family, no questions asked. No one told me that policy only ran in one direction. My sister Lacey is 3 years younger than me. She works in tech sales in Austin, moved there right out of college, and has been doing extremely well for herself. Her words, usually delivered with the energy of someone who expects a round of applause. She drives a white Range Rover. She takes 2 international trips a year. My parents talk about her the way people talk about a local celebrity. My mom used to FaceTime Lacey on speakerphone when I was visiting, laughing at her stories, asking follow-up questions, leaning toward the phone with her whole body. She'd hang up glowing. Then she'd turn to me and say, "Did you see if the rent posted yet?" Not, "How are you doing?" Not, "Thank you for everything you do." Not, "We know this is a lot and we want you to know we see it." Just, "Did the rent post?" I tried to have the conversation exactly once. I was 26, sitting in their kitchen after a double shift, and I asked my dad if he'd thought about applying for disability, since his back legitimately qualified. He got quiet. Then, he said, "You're doing fine, aren't you? You make good money." My mom jumped in before I could answer. "Lacey's still getting her career off the ground, Sienna. You're the stable one. We know we can count on you." Stable. Like I was a piece of furniture, like being reliable was a personality flaw they'd graciously decided to overlook. I drove home that night with my hands tight on the steering wheel and cried the whole way down Colfax Avenue. My husband Drew had been in my life for 3 of those 4 years, and he saw it clearly from the beginning in a way I couldn't. He never pushed me, never gave me ultimatums, but I'd catch him watching me transfer the money sometimes. He'd have this expression. Not angry, just tired on my behalf. He asked me once, not accusatory, just genuinely curious, "What do you think they'd do if you stopped?" I didn't have an answer. The question terrified me more than their actual behavior did, and looking back, that says everything. My friend Monica, who I've known since PT school, was less gentle about it. Monica is a nurse. She's seen every variety of human manipulation there is, and she has zero patience for it. She sat across from me at a coffee shop about 2 years in, looked me dead in the face and said, "Sienna, when is the last time your mom called just to ask how you were doing? Not about money, just you." I opened my mouth to answer and genuinely couldn't think of one. "That's your answer," she said, and then she paid for both our coffees and changed the subject because she knew I wasn't ready to hear it yet. I kept sending the money. I told myself they'd get back on their feet. I told myself things would stabilize. I kept moving the finish line a little further out. I'd been saving for a house in stolen pockets of time. 100 here, 200 there, whatever I had left after everything. It took me 6 years. Drew and I weren't married yet when I started. We were just dating, living separately, and I was squirreling away money in a high-yield savings account I didn't talk about because I was afraid if my parents knew I had savings, they'd factor it into their expectations. The account had $38,000 in it by the time I found the right place. A 2-bedroom condo in the Sloan's Lake neighborhood. Good bones, a little dated but mine. Completely mine. The closing was scheduled for a Thursday in late October. I told my parents 3 weeks in advance. I called to remind them the week before. My mom said, "Of course, honey, we'll be there." I sent them the address. I made a reservation at a restaurant nearby for a small celebration dinner afterward. Just my parents, Drew, and my Aunt Ruth, my mom's older sister, who'd always been kind to me in a way my mom sometimes forgot to be. The morning of closing, I was so nervous I could barely eat. Drew held my hand the whole drive to the title company. I signed approximately 400 pages of documents and walked out with a set of keys that felt impossibly heavy in a good way. We went back to the condo. I stood in the empty living room with its south-facing windows and the afternoon light coming in golden flat across the hardwood floors, and I thought, I did this. I actually did this. I checked my phone. Nothing from my parents. I texted my mom. "We just got the keys. Heading to clean up a bit before dinner. So excited to see you guys tonight." 2 hours went by. Drew and I were wiping down the kitchen cabinets when I finally called. My dad picked up on the 4th ring. There was noise in the background, a TV maybe, or a restaurant. "Hey," he said, not "congratulations," not "we're on our way," just "hey. Dad, dinner's in an hour. Are you guys leaving soon?" A pause. "Yeah, look, your mom's not feeling great. Her head's been bad today." "Is she okay?" "She's fine. She just doesn't think she can make the drive." The drive, 20 minutes, on a Thursday, to celebrate the biggest thing I had done in my adult life. "Can I talk to her?" I asked. He handed the phone over. My mom's voice came on and she didn't sound like someone with a migraine. She sounded completely normal, maybe a little impatient. "Sienna, we'll come see it another time. You're making a bigger deal out of this than it needs to be. Stop making everything about yourself." I stood in my new kitchen, the keys still on the counter in front of me, and I felt something go cold and very still inside me. Not hot anger, cold. The kind that doesn't shake, the kind that just decides. "Okay," I said, "okay, Mom." I hung up. Drew found me standing there a minute later, completely motionless, staring at nothing. "What happened?" he asked. I told him. His face freeze went several things. He started to say something, but I held up one hand. "I need to make some calls," I said. "Give me an hour." I sat down on the kitchen floor. There was no furniture yet, and I opened my banking app. I canceled the autopay to my parents' account. Then I called the gas and electric company and removed my name from their service address. Then I called their landlord, a guy named Phil I'd been corresponding with for years, and I told him that I would no longer be serving as the financial point of contact for my parents' unit, that any communication about rent should go directly to them, and that my information should be removed from the lease as a guarantor. Phil was quiet for a second. "Understood," he said. "I appreciate the heads up." Then I sat there on my hardwood floor in my new home, and for the first time in 4 years, I didn't feel the weight of the transfer I was about to make, because there wasn't one. Drew came and sat on the floor next to me. He didn't say anything. He just put his arm around me and stayed. By morning, my phone had 11 missed calls from my dad and a 3-paragraph voicemail from my mom that I will not repeat verbatim but included the phrases, "How dare you, after everything we've sacrificed, and you'll understand when you're older." I was 29. I had understood things for a very long time. Lacey called that afternoon. I thought for a moment, one hopeful, foolish moment, that she was calling to check on me. She was not. "Mom called me," she said. "She's really upset." I know. "Sienna, you can't just cut them off like that." "Lacey, I've been giving them $1,500 a month for 4 years. They couldn't drive 20 minutes to my closing dinner. They have health issues." Mom didn't sound sick. She sounded annoyed that I called. A pause. "Look, I have a lot going on right now. I can't take this on. Can you just figure something out with them?" I waited a beat. What does "take this on" mean? Are you saying you could contribute to their expenses? The silence on her end said everything. "I have my own finances to manage," she said finally. "You make more than I do." I knew for a fact she made more than I did. I'd seen her W-2 during a tax question she'd texted me about 2 years prior, and then immediately wished she hadn't sent. But I didn't say that. I just said, "Then I guess they'll need to figure something out," and ended the call. Aunt Ruth was the one person I could actually talk to. She's my mom's older sister by 7 years, lived in Fort Collins, had always seen through the family mythology more clearly than anyone. I called her that evening and told her everything. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment and then said, "I've been watching this for 4 years, Sienna. You did the right thing. I'm sorry it took something this big to get you here." 3 days later, Aunt Ruth drove to my parents' apartment unannounced. I didn't ask her to, she went on her own. I only found out because my mom called me screaming about it afterward. Apparently, Aunt Ruth had sat down in their living room and laid out, calmly and clearly, exactly what she thought of how they'd treated me. She'd told them that "Sienna has been carrying you both for 4 years, and you couldn't show up once, for the most important day she's had as an adult." She'd told them that if they had an ounce of decency, they would be ashamed of themselves. My mom had asked her to leave. Aunt Ruth had said, "Gladly," and walked out. My dad texted me that night, "Your aunt had no business coming here and interfering in family matters." I read it and put the phone in a drawer. 10 days after the closing, I got a call from my dad's younger brother, my Uncle Dale. We weren't particularly close. He lived in Colorado Springs. We saw each other at holidays. He was a quiet guy who mostly kept to himself. But he sounded agitated when he called, like he'd been sitting on something, and finally couldn't anymore. "Sienna, I need to tell you something," he said. "And I want you to know I'm not trying to start anything. I just think you deserve to know." He told me that 3 years ago, my dad's old workplace injury case had finally settled. A personal injury lawsuit that had been winding through the courts for almost a decade. He'd won. The settlement was $47,000 after legal fees. Uncle Dale knew because he'd helped my dad find the attorney. He said my dad had been thrilled. He'd expected my parents to tell me, expected maybe they'd use the money to get back on their feet and stop relying so heavily on me. They hadn't told me, not a word. And then Uncle Dale said, "There's something else. About 2.5–3 years ago, your dad bought a storage unit property out in Aurora. Small commercial thing, 12 units, rents for around $800 a month total. He mentioned it to me once when he'd had a couple beers. Said it was his retirement plan. Said between that and Social Security and..." He paused. "And what you were sending, they were doing just fine." I had to sit down. "Between that and what you were sending." He'd said it like a line item, like I was a passive income stream. I asked Uncle Dale if he was certain. He was. He'd seen the property deed when my dad asked him to co-sign something unrelated, and the paperwork had been on the table. The storage units, the settlement, the Social Security disability payments my dad had been receiving for 2 years. All of it sitting there invisible to me while I budgeted carefully every month and ate rice and chicken and told myself this was what family looked like. I hung up with Uncle Dale and sat very still for a long time. Then I called Monica. She came over within the hour, sat at my new kitchen table with her laptop open, and started working. Monica knew a consumer protection attorney through her hospital network, a woman named Andrea, who specialized in exactly this kind of financial situation. We laid everything out. The 4 years of transfers, the settlement money, the storage unit property, the Social Security payments. Andrea walked me through it the next day. She explained that because my parents had been receiving Social Security disability benefits, they were required to report all additional income above a certain threshold. Rental income absolutely counted. If they hadn't reported it, that was a matter for the Social Security Administration. She also flagged something I hadn't even thought about. My parents had been listing my monthly transfers on their taxes as family support income, which wasn't illegal by itself, but the way they'd structured it in conjunction with the disability claim created a problem. The SSA's definition of substantial gainful activity had a nuance here that their situation may have run afoul of. Andrea told me to document everything. I had 4 years of bank transfers. I had their lease records. I had Uncle Dale willing to put what he knew in writing. I had the storage unit deed, which was public record. This isn't necessarily criminal, Andrea said, but it is serious. And it's absolutely your right to walk away from all of it. I asked her to send a formal letter to my parents, drafted on her letterhead, stating that I was terminating all financial support, that any further attempts to access accounts in my name would be considered fraud, and that I had retained legal counsel. She sent it certified mail. Lacey called me twice that week. I let both go to voicemail. The second one, she actually left a message. Mom said you got a lawyer involved. Sienna, this is insane. They're our parents. You need to call me back. I listened to it once and deleted it. What happened next I pieced together from Aunt Ruth, from Uncle Dale, and from a brief, factual phone call I eventually had with my dad 3 weeks later, when I'd calmed down enough to hear him out. The Social Security Administration had opened a review. It wasn't a criminal matter, or at least it wasn't heading that way initially. It was an overposted situation. The rental income from the storage units had not been properly reported for 2 of the 3 years they'd owned the property. They'd need to repay a portion of what they'd received. The amount wasn't enormous, but it wasn't nothing either. In addition, their Lakewood landlord, Phil, had moved to evict them when the rent went unpaid for 2 months. Without my transfers, they had income, but not enough to cover their lifestyle the way they'd structured it. Because they'd built their monthly expenses around having my money in the equation. They had to move. They ended up in a smaller place further out, in Arvada, subsidized rent for lower-income seniors. It wasn't a punishment I'd designed, it was just what happened when the thing you'd built your life around stopped being there. My dad called me from the new address. He sounded older than I'd ever heard him sound. He said he was sorry. He said he should have told me about the settlement. He said a lot of things, some of which I believed and some of which I wasn't sure about. I told him I needed time. I told him I wasn't closing the door, but I wasn't opening it all the way back up either. Not yet. Maybe not ever the same way. He said he understood. I'm not sure he did, but he said it. Lacey sent me a text 2 months later. It was short. I talked to Mom. I understand more now. I'm sorry I wasn't there for you. I read it a few times. I didn't respond right away. I needed to figure out what I actually felt before I said anything. Aunt Ruth came down from Fort Collins for a weekend in December. She brought a bottle of wine and a small houseplant, a trailing pothos, and she set it in the window where the afternoon light hit and said, "Every house needs something green." We sat at my table and talked for 4 hours about everything, my parents, my childhood, the particular exhaustion of being the responsible one in a family that mistakes responsibility for unlimited resource. She told me that she'd watched my mom outsource her own anxiety onto me since I was a teenager. "You learned to carry things that weren't yours," she said. "You can put them down now." I spent that winter slowly furnishing the condo. Nothing extravagant. I was still careful with money, probably always would be. But I bought a couch I actually loved, a deep blue sectional that took up most of the living room and felt like a hug every time I sat on it. I got a real bed frame, not just a mattress on the floor. I found a dining table at an estate sale, solid wood, slightly too big for the space, and I kept it anyway because it felt like the kind of table that expected people to gather around it. I planted herbs in the kitchen window next to Aunt Ruth's pothos. I learned that my mortgage payment was $400 less per month than my parents' rent had been, and that difference sat in my account, untouched, like a small miracle every time I saw it. Drew proposed in February, in the living room in front of the blue couch, with no audience and no fanfare, which is exactly how we both wanted it. He said he'd been waiting until I was in a place that was really mine before he asked. I laughed and cried simultaneously, and said yes before he'd even finished the sentence. The thing I've thought about most, in the quiet months since all of it happened, is the guilt. How long it kept me in place. I grew up believing that if I didn't give, I was abandoning people who needed me, that love was measured in sacrifice, and that the more something cost you, the more it proved you cared. I think my parents believed that too, genuinely in some part of themselves. I don't think they sat down one day and decided to use me. I think they just let themselves believe that because I kept giving, I must be fine, and because Lacey didn't give, she got treated like a guest. The family's good opinion of you, it turns out, is sometimes cheapest to buy from people who have no intention of reciprocating it. I know who showed up for me now. I know whose number I reach for when something actually matters. It's Drew. It's Monica. It's Aunt Ruth who drove down unannounced when I needed someone in my corner and didn't wait to be asked. It's Uncle Dale who made a hard phone call because he thought I deserved the truth. Real family isn't the people you share a last name with. It's the people who show up. Not for the easy moments, not when it's convenient, for the moments that count. I stood at my kitchen window on a Tuesday morning in March, the pothos trailing almost to the counter. By then the herbs coming in new and green, a mug of coffee warm in both hands. Outside, the mountains were visible on the horizon the way they sometimes are in Denver, sharp and pale against a blue sky. I thought about the 25-year-old who'd started this whole thing, who'd opened that first auto transfer and told herself it was temporary, that she was helping, that it would all be worth it eventually. She wasn't wrong to try. She was just wrong about what she was owed in return. I'm not her anymore. And this, the window, the light, the green things growing, the life I built with what I had left after all of it, this is mine. Nobody handed it to me. Nobody will take it from me. I made sure of that.